You are listening to the Global Psychosis Network.
Global Psychosis Entertainment presents the Jimbo Trashy Podcast.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Everything is a conspiracy.
It's the Jimbo Trashy Podcast, where everything is a conspiracy. Even you are a conspiracy. This is episode 17. I am your host, Jimbo Trashy. Tonight my guests are, I want to say, is it Clive Farrington?
Clive Farrington, yeah.
Farrington, and then Chris?
Chris.
Just Chris?
Just Chris.
Okay. What was it? Just Chris tonight.
Chris Foreman.
We should have discussed aliases before we did this, but we just kind of jumped into it. But, welcome to the Jimbo Trashy Podcast. Thanks for being my guest tonight.
Thank you.
So, Clive, I know you were born in England. Where exactly in England were you born?
From Manchester.
Manchester. Okay.
Yeah. Which has obviously has its musical roots, really solid musical roots. And we're close to Liverpool, of course, where the band came from, the Beatles.
What's it like in Manchester?
Oh, it's weather's very similar to what it is tonight. It's very cold. It's renowned for its rain and stuff, but as far as the music, the heritage of music and everything in Manchester is fabulous, as you know. We had one of the best clubs that in the world, if you like, called the Hacienda, which was open for about 10 years, and obviously then we have the band's New Order, who are owners of the Hacienda. And then in the 80s, all the bands that came from Liverpool, my band When in Rome, were kind of coming up at the same time as like the Flock of Seagulls, Echo and the Bunnymen, and we have this thing in Manchester and Liverpool where we have this rivalry in soccer, but we don't have the rivalry in music. We're all kind of together when it comes to the music. So in other words, New Order are loved as much in Liverpool as they are in Manchester, and Echo and the Bunnymen are loved as much in Manchester as they are in Liverpool. So,
did you live in Manchester your entire life, or was it?
Yeah, South Manchester actually. A place called Altrincham in Cheshire, which is quite a nice area. But very, very close to Manchester city centre, so it was really easy for us to get to all the clubs and everything else, and so we were very, very close to everything that was going on in Manchester as far as the scene, the music scene, and everything. And
so you just recently moved to the States then?
Yeah, I mean, kind of temporarily at the moment, but more permanently later on in the summer 2013. We're coming out on tour again in 2013 in summer. And hopefully by then I'll have everything sorted as far as solid work and everything else, and because I'm involved with a studio apart from the When in Rome thing. I'm involved with a studio called Jet Studios, having come from another studios in Manchester where I'm from called Castle Rock Studios, which was a mansion house. And it was kind of a derelict building when we went into it, and I watched the build from day one. I watched it as a pile of rubble built up into this beautiful studio, and that's the kind of thing that I'm bringing on board to Jet Studios in Lakewood, California. So, cool. But I think we're a bit further ahead there because at least the stuff's in there. The actual equipment is in there already. So it's going to be more of a refurbishment rather than a rebuild.
How long have you been writing and recording music?
Well, I was in the school band. I was a drummer in the school band. Drums are my first instrument. That was the first thing that I was into when I was about 5-6 years of age. So I became the drummer in the school band, doing all the classical and waltz time stuff and everything else. And but funnily enough, I never was a drummer in any band. I was never asked to be a drummer in any band, if you like. And then I worked for a company called Farrett Machinery in Altrincham, from where I'm from, and the foreman there was in a band. And he was shouting around I was working one day, and he was saying, we tonight our bass player's ill. Is there anybody that can play the bass? And I said, well, I'll have a go.
How old were you when this happened?
I was about 17, 18.
Okay.
Yeah. And I said, if you've not got a bass player, I'll have a go. So I went out to Woolworths, which was still going at that time, which is like Walmart here. Bought myself a little cheap bass guitar, and I said, I can't do any of this fingering stuff, any of this really hard, the technical stuff. So if you can transpose all your songs into E, A, D or G, so I can play open strings, and that's exactly what they did. So I started playing bass then, and I got really into bass. I used to watch television and play the bass and have my ear to the body. Mm-hmm. And listen to the vibration of the bass and learn to play that way. So I became a bass player in a band called When in Rome, not When in Rome, Bow Leisure before When in Rome. Okay. And yeah, when I was 17, 18.
Do you have a favorite instrument in particular that you like to play, or?
Well, now it's more. I'm more into programming now. I'm more into the MIDI stuff and the digital recording and 5.1 stuff, of course, for film. Mm-hmm. So I actually enjoy programming sounds and listening to sounds, and maybe sounds that have already been created that are already good. You know what I mean? Uh-huh. But I do. To tell you the truth, I've not touched. I do on occasion touch the bass, and it's like riding a bike. I think when I get a hold of a bass, it's I can actually play it again. But I don't play it on an everyday basis. But the programming thing is where I'm at the moment.
That's it's kind of similar to me. I know, like I told you before, like the bass guitar was kind of like the first instrument that I always hear in my head when I start a song.
Yeah, cool.
And I love programming now as well. That's kind of what I kind of focus on. I still have guitars and basses whenever I need it, but I'm more of a studio musician,
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like on stage I'm more of like an entertainer, so I don't really want to be stuck with like the robotics of just like playing the same riff or whatever,
Absolutely, because that's where I came from with the bass. Listening to the bass, and when you think about it, and when you actually look at the history of music, producers always come from the bass side of things and the rhythm side of things, either drummers or bass players, and it's because that's the foundation of music, and that's exactly what I was listening to as I was growing up. I used to listen to John Peel. And I was very lucky to grow up in a period in, like for instance, in 1976 when punk exploded in the UK. I was very lucky. I was 18, and it was like the best thing that ever happened. All we'd had was the Beatles and Cliff Richard, and then all of a sudden we get these bands that are saying things, that are giving out giving out a message, and I was very, very lucky to have lived through that period.
Your band, you said you had before, is it Bow Leisure?
Bow Leisure, yeah.
Bow Leisure. What was like the intended musical differences when you went into When in Rome, or where you started to create that band?
Well, Bow Leisure, it was very I love organics. I love things to happen organically, and I think that the transition from Bow Leisure to When in Rome was really organic. We used to have a fella called Andrew Mann supporting us with Bow Leisure. And he used to do punk poet. He used to, like John Cooper Clarke, all the beat poets. He used to come on stage before we'd come on stage and do all these fancy poems and stuff.
Is that like spoken word type stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. But with a more of a cutting edge than a normal poem. It's like a anti-government stuff. Everything. Like a punk poet, the punk movement was talking against the system, if you like, or making a statement against the system, and that's exactly what the punk poets were doing. So he was doing these poems, and I was actually doing music for his, he'd have music in the background of his poems as well, which was a little bit different than the other punk poets that were on the circuit at that time.
What year was this when it was going on?
This would have been, I would have thought 85. Round about 85. Yeah, and I'd met Andrew through, we used to go to these places in Manchester, and obviously you get these places where everybody hangs out, all the musicians hang out and everything else, so I met him through that. He then started to support us with Bow Leisure, I should say, and then Bow Leisure just started. We split up and then formed a band called When in Rome. And the natural progression, I'm thinking to myself, we need a lyricist. I'm not great with lyrics. Andrew, he writes these poems. Bring him in as a lyricist. And the weirdest thing is that the way it worked with When in Rome is that I'd write the main lyrics from a melody that Mike would write, the keyboard player, and I would write the first verse and the chorus, and then ask Andrew to come on board and then finish it off, and that's the way it worked with every one of the songs on the first album.
So the previous band, you didn't really have that much lyrical content?
Well, there was, and it was at a time when the new romantic thing was happening, you know, with Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet and everything else, and I think we thought we kind of saw ourselves as on that level, if you like. With the,
how did you get into that like that 80s like new wave type sound that kind of took over the music airwaves back then? Like, do you think you kind of just were gravitated towards it, or you just were doing your own thing and they lumped you into that category?
Yeah, you know what, I loved Simple Minds and Depeche Mode and Ultravox before Midge-Ure. I mean, with John Fox, you know, the original Ultravox, which I would class as that's pure. That was the pure Ultravox, if you like. So we were always into this electronic music, and of course we grew up with New Order in Manchester, who were obviously very electronic. And the thing to beat was the Blue Monday, that 12-inch dance record, Blue Monday by New Order. That was the kind of, that and Vienna by Ultravox was that was our holy grail, if you like. If we could write something as close to that, and I think that's what got us into electronic music.
Did you ever meet those guys, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because we always went to the Hacienda, and they kind of half owned the Hacienda with Factory Records, who was their record label. I actually lived in London for 10 years, so yeah, we hung around with those people. Pet Shop Boys were another thing. You know what, I was never really bang into the Pet Shop Boys, but I kind of understood where they were coming from. I loved the sound, if you like, but I was never really into the music. But I actually met them as well in... Is that my phone going? I met them, and like most Manchester people, they're very down to earth, and they're not up themselves like most pop stars are.
How did you actually get started, like say officially in the music business? Was it, did someone just come up to you and say, hey, here's a record deal, or did you have to knock on doors?
You know what, this is where I bring Andrew in, because Andrew, more than anything, Andrew is the best blagger in the world. He knew how to talk with people. He could hold a conversation with anybody in any room. And he lived at the very same time that we'd formed When in Rome. Andrew was actually going down. We still lived in Manchester, and Andrew went down to live in London to follow a career, whatever it was some kind of career, whether it was acting career or as a poet or whatever. He went down to London, and we'd not got the deal at this time, but we'd recorded The Promise, which was the hit record, in our little, which very similar to the place that you've got here. Very small back, it was at the back of mum and dad's house. My dad had built this studio, and we'd written The Promise already. So he'd gone down to London at the same time, and this was before we'd even called ourselves When in Rome. We were in a band together. So he'd gone down with The Promise, and he hung around in all the right places. He went where all the A&R men hung out, and he got drunk with them, of course, and then on the way home, and it was the same time it was at a time when there was only tape players in the car, so he'd have the tape of The Promise, and he'd go home with all the, like somebody would give him a lift home, and he'd play The Promise in the car, and so it kind of created interest. And we were very lucky in the respect that we actually signed to Elektra Records, and this is weird in itself, because Andrew is a massive fan of The Doors. And he looks a little bit like, or at the time he'd looked like Jim Morrison from The Doors, and we signed to Elektra Records. So as far as he was concerned, I'm sure that was fait accompli for him. He wouldn't have mattered whether we would have a hit record or not. I think the fact that we signed to Elektra Records was and for me, of course, it was a great thing, because it's a major label, and for some reason, Elektra decided to stop operations in the UK, so it was really very difficult for us to communicate back to the US. We were still signed to them. They took all the operations back to the US, and so because of the time difference, because we're 8 hours between.
Hey Clive, hold that thought. We'll be right back on the Jimbo Trashy Podcast.
Thank you.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Everything is a conspiracy.
You are listening to the Global Psychosis Network.
Welcome back to the Jimbo Trashy Podcast. So, Clive, go ahead and say what you're saying. The last commercial.
Yeah, we were talking about Andrew being a massive, important part of the When in Rome, the success of When in Rome, if you like. He hung around in all the right places. He befriended all the right people. He actually shared a flat with Jonathan Ross, who is a very, very renowned TV personality in the UK. I'm sure that a lot of people know him here as well.
So he knew people already, or he was just a charismatic guy?
Absolutely a charismatic guy, and became and got to know people.
Oh, okay.
Got to know the movers and shakers, if you like, for want of better words, the movers and shakers within the music industry. And when we'd written the song "The Promise," it was. It's a weird thing because I'd never obviously before The Promise I'd never written a hit record, but you kind of knew it had a chance when we'd written it, and I'd written the melody of the verse and the melody of the chorus, and I wrote it. I kind of had the feeling that there was something here, so that Andrew had something of substance to actually take around, and obviously he believed in it as well, so he had no qualms in taking it around all the record and the people that he knew, and he actually knew the absolute right people to play this stuff to, and we were lucky to sign to Elektra first, and then because of the trouble with the time difference, we couldn't deal with it because of the time differences and everything else. We actually did a showcase in a place called Nomis, which is a very, very famous rehearsal studio in London, and it was to a lot of there was about 10 record companies there. So from that showcase we signed to Elektra, and then because we'd decided to leave Elektra because we couldn't deal with the time difference and everything else, luckily Virgin Records was still interested, so then we signed to Virgin.
How does the time difference affect?
It is very difficult. I mean, right now, if we look at the time right now, we're 8 hours in front. We're about 8:30 here now, so I would say we're 8 hours ahead. So it's about 4:30 in the morning. So just about time when we want to talk with people, they're in bed in the US, So.
Oh, I mean, just like negotiating contract stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. The everyday running of your business, if you like, with the record company, and trying to contact them. When you want to contact them, they're not available, of course. So that was very, very difficult. So then we went to Virgin, which and signed by a fella called Mick Clark to Virgin Records, who was responsible for signing a lot of really big artists like Soul to Soul, and lots more that I can't doesn't spring to mind right now. But yeah, Mick Clark was a very famous A&R fella, and still had interest in us, even though we'd already been signed to Elektra Records. So and the belief was such that they actually had to pay Elektra Records, of course, needed paying back for all the demo time that they'd paid for and everything else. So part of that deal was to pay back Elektra.
Okay, so when you came up with the song "The Promise," how did it like come to you? Were you just chilling one day and just wrote some lyrics, messing around? Or?
Yeah, the weirdest thing about that song is it's got to have happened. You know, the lyrical meaning has got to have happened in my life. I can't deny that it must have had that kind of situation where you've been, you like somebody and they don't reciprocate, and it's like if you wait around enough time, if you wait around for long enough time, then I might get you to like me or whatever. That's what it's about. It's a simple thing like that, you know, that you're with somebody, they might not like you as much as you like them, but if you wait around a while, you might think differently. That's as simple as that, and I think that is why it became a hit record, because it's dead simple. It's so simple and honest. That is. If somebody was to ask me why I think it was a hit, I'd say it's because it's from the heart and it's honest.
And you were saying while you were writing it and you're coming up with the melody, you already felt that it was going to be a hit?
Yeah, as soon as I'd sung the verse and the chorus. Because it was one of those things, Mike had played the keyboard part, and then I came up with that melody of the "If you need a friend, or look to a stranger," and then into the chorus. Yes, it did have a feeling of, and it's a weird one because I'd never had that experience of having a hit record before. So
that was the first time you felt that when you were writing a song?
Yeah. Never felt it since.
Do you think, when you say you never felt it since, you mean like when you wrote that song, it just came naturally without even thinking about it?
Yeah.
And the other ones, you have more of a struggle?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about the song. I've never written a hit song, obviously, but
yeah.
I mean, I kind of feel like a song that I like, and I think that's going to be a good song that I've done. It just seems to come out without even thinking about it.
They're the ones. Yeah, absolutely. And then because you're trying to follow that, of course, you're trying to. There's nothing better than to have a hit after a hit, you know. And obviously bands have done that, and it's so. I don't know. It's very difficult because I think what we've done is we've written this song, love it or obviously there's people that hate it, but generally people have obviously liked it, and so people have bought it. But what you try and do as a band is you try and follow that. If you've had success with that, because what this business is all about more than anything, of course, we are artists and we love to be very arty-farty and love the music and everything else, but we want to make money from it. We want to make money from what we love. And you know, the best way of making money from what we love is to extend what we've already made into something successful, make something else successful, and it's so difficult. And I think what we'd done is we'd hit a very rich vein of a good song, and couldn't match it, couldn't follow it, if you like. And we always listened to it back and thought, what was great about that? And what was really great about it is because it came from the heart, and it was instant, and without, like you say, it was without thinking about it.
How do they determine a hit exactly? Does the A&R guy just tell you that's going to be the hit? Or do they just put any song out there and let the audience decide?
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what happened with The Promise. Mike, the keyboard player, his cousin was coming out to live in San Francisco at the same time as the 12-inch record had been released in the UK, and he brought it out with him to San Francisco. And he knew nothing about the record industry, he knew nothing about radio stations, knew nothing. He goes out to this, which at the time it was called Live 105 in San Francisco, and I think it was the biggest station at the time in America, on the West Coast at least. So he stumbles upon this record company, radio station, and he takes our 12-inch record and he says, "This is a band from the UK, play it. It's your exclusive, that you're going to be the first to play this." And so they did, and it snowballed from there. And I don't know whether you know this, but the difference between the UK and the USA is that you get a hit record from radio plays in the US. In the UK, you have to sell a lot of records. You know,
that sounds kind of strange.
It's a different way.
How would you sell if you didn't hear it, you know?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So in other words, in the UK, yes, you have to do all the plugging and the marketing and everything else to get it played on the radio stations for it to be able to be bought by the public, if you like, or to be heard by the public in order for them to buy it. But in the US, it's actually purely on, and still is, on radio plays. If your record is being played on all stations, all the major stations in the US, that's a hit record. It doesn't matter whether you've sold 5 copies. If there's playing it on all these radio stations, that's how it becomes a hit record.
Would you say it's harder to make a hit song in the US or the UK?
Do you know what? It's so weird, this, because the biggest bands in the UK now, like you might not have heard of them, Take That. They're massive in the UK and Europe. Robbie Williams, who was the lead singer with Take That, who left and became a solo artist, can't get arrested in the US. He's in Europe and the UK, he sells out tours, 20,000 venues, 20,000 seater venues, and we didn't write a song for the US. You know, we didn't write a song specifically for the USA. But what I think, having picked the bones out of it all, I would say that the US see sincerity in songs more than the UK do. The UK like the pop, sugary, and the very instantly forgettable songs, whereas the US kind of listen to songs a little bit more, and they listen to the content a little bit more, and I think that's probably why the Promise was a hit.
So when you signed with Virgin UK, what was it like dealing with those guys? Was it just headache after headache, or was it they actually cool? I mean, do you miss that? For
me, I was very, very wary of work. You know, I didn't like. You know, for me, I'm not. I love being in the studio. I like working in the studio. Dealing with the record company was another thing. It was very, very
corporate.
Yeah, corporate, and it was a difficult thing for me to actually walk into the record company and deal with the people that work within the record, and we used to go. We'd have to be there every other day to deal with stuff and everything else, and it was, I don't know. It was. I'm not cut out for that kind of thing. I don't think.
Do they treat you like with respect, like you're an artist, or is it just like, hey, you know, you're just another person in the lineup, like make us our record and get the hell out of here?
Well, I think we were lucky because. Although I say it was Virgin Records that we signed with, we came from Elektra, which was a major label, and of course Virgin's a major label, but it was a division of Virgin that we signed to, and it was called 10 Records. So they kind of were, which is, I think that's, record companies don't work, unfortunately they don't work like this anymore. What they do, the majors like Universal and stuff like that, they do have these little offshoot labels and stuff like that, and look after different genres of music, but not as much as they used to do in the 70s and 80s and stuff. They used to have a specific division of a record company that was called something different to deal with that kind of music, if you like. And in that respect, we were kind of looked after more than we would have been if we'd have been with a major, because the majors, of course, have got the bigger artists. Because at the same time that we'd signed, Simply Red had signed, and they became absolutely massive, because that was Elektra. So Elektra are going to give all, you know, there's 2 British bands that are signed to Elektra at the same time. Simply Red had the massive hit record with Money's Too Tight to Mention. That was the same time that we'd been signed. So all of their marketing might at that time was going to Simply Red.
On that note, we'll be right back on the Jimbo Trashy Podcast.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Everything is a conspiracy.
Check out the latest sounds from the occult experimental rock project, Elvis on Acid, with their second album release, Prehistoric Psychonaut.
With historic obligations, we've come so far. We're cutting away the spiritual line. Consolation, they don't care who you are. You're damning us to hell, it's written in the stars.
Follow Elvis on Acid on Twitter @Elvis on Acid. Go to youtube.com/Elvis on Acid to hear the latest. Global Psychosis Entertainment, Dark Jam Records, and Elvis on Acid are not responsible for any violent revolutions, drug overdoses, or attempted suicides that may occur after listening. This ad has been brought to you by Global Psychosis Entertainment and Dark Jam Records. Copyright 2012.